Welcome, Mark. Hey, there's Bill. All right, we're just getting things underway, joining up here. Hold on a second. I also want to interview. There he is. All right. Now we got the gang all here. Thank you, everyone. Let's get this chat bot and all this music to be quiet here. Wait bot. Sorry, I said chat bot. All right, use their microphone and let's get going. Yay! Woo! Oh my God, it's a bad hair month, but we'll get past that. Very nice to see everyone here, and so glad to be back after such an amazing Thanksgiving break here with my colleagues, Michael Moon and William Leiter, Bill Leiter. Actually, we'll talk about that later, Bill. I believe Bill is okay here. So we have a lot of stuff going on, and it's really all coming together. This has been a big year for us, as we've mentioned in the past. We've been doing these Waymaker series shows now for about 7 months, and pretty much every week. We've missed a couple here and there, taking weeks off or some retrospective. And that's actually going to be a little bit about what we talk about today, in inspection and retrospective here as we're approaching the end of the year. And there's so much to talk about, but at this moment, we know what most CXOs and executives and transformational leaders and change agents are thinking about, and that's 2022 and what does it hold. So today's topic is, what will it take to thrive in 2022? And there's a lot of things going on. And so obviously we're set up looking at, is there a post-pandemic era that we're entering in? Some would say no. I believe it's pretty endemic at this point. That's what our conversation was with Michael and Bill earlier this morning about it. If you saw the South Park special, maybe you didn't, but of course they were projecting 3 decades into the future and saying COVID is nearly over. Yay! Quite a funny episode if you're into South Park at all. The satire is just stunning. But we want to get more practical here today, and we want to put this into a performative context for you so that you can understand what will it really take to thrive, and what it will really take is a real plan. What we believe it'll take, as you might see up on Michael's screen there, is not just a strategic plan, but also a culture plan, and one that actually intersects with all of your employees and your ecosystem stakeholders and their personal plans. And how do we get it to a state of aligned readiness, which is really the core concept behind Bill's book, Mastering Your Balance. So in setting it up that way, Michael, let me just start with you and ask you the simple question to get to a simple answer before we go deep. What will it take to thrive in 2022?
Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone. our fireside chat is focused on one overarching question: what would it take to perform to potential? And rather than it just being kind of a one-off, one-and-done question, it is a persistent virtual question that we keep asking, so as to peel back the layers of what one of my teachers would call the veil of tranquilized obviousness, and pierce that veil into what is our opportunity today. So now we've heard about the Great Reset, the Great Reshuffle, the Great Accommodation, blah blah blah, and I think what collectively we are all grappling with, that there's nothing that really describes this situation that we're in. I'm going to take an idea from a economic historian in his book of Ages of American Capitalism, in which he characterizes today as the age of chaos. And the age of chaos is there's no discernible pattern by which to predict the future. So this requires that we have a different mindset and a different way of planning and moving towards our objectives and what is also personally meaningful. That said, as Chris, you kind of framed it up, most organizations have a strategic plan. And one of the points that Bill will make is that some cases they are just kind of notions that are somehow rambling around in the CEO's head, to maybe some scribbles on a whiteboard, to maybe one or two slides in a PowerPoint deck, to all the way to something that is now very concrete and persistent and pervasive throughout the organization. So irrespective of whether you have a fuzzy whiteboard or a well-defined plan with objectives and key results and metrics for measuring progress, most organizations have a plan. Few organizations have its complement of a culture plan. And a culture plan really defines how do we mobilize the hearts and minds and creativity and passions of the people that work with us and for us. So a culture plan is the complement of a business plan. And then finally, a personal plan, which is how do we bring co-ownership and accountability down to the individual. So against that backdrop, we're going to be exploring in today's session, what would it take to perform to potential in this age of chaos? And we'll bring forward the notion of a performative context. And a performative context is essentially what is in the physical and mental space of getting your job done. And it's our operating theory or hypothesis that one, it is the job of leadership to design and support those performative contexts, but it is also something that is co-created with each worker. And the ability to co-create is and the action of co-creating is essentially a topic that we are really delving into in today's fireside chat.
Yes, and beyond that, there's so many things inside this. It's such a rich conversation, and it seems like perhaps it might be overwhelming to a CXO who's looking at this, who's already doing their best and wants to do better. But it is possible, and that's what we're here to help you do. Bill, let's go ahead and get you unmuted. You hit that little monkey button there on the bottom of the screen. And how would you add to that? Because Michael set up the situation, I think, quite well, and certainly a bit of our perspective. But what would you say to that CXO at that technology company or other mid-sized company out there in terms of what it's going to take for them to thrive in this age of chaos?
Well, first of all, and good morning, everyone. First of all, can you hear me?
Get a little closer to the microphone, please.
How about now?
That's better. Thank you, sir.
First of all, what is today's current reality? You can't hear me.
Now we can. There you go.
All right, better.
Thank you, sir.
First of all, what is today's current reality? Where are you today? Because if you don't know where you're starting from, as someone once said, if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there.
Mm.
Where are we today? That requires an assessment. Now, we have designed an assessment to do just that, and it measures aligned readiness, it measures transformation readiness across 6 elements of balance. Where are you with respect to your vision, your values, values driven leadership, which is simply the ability to have and live values that are behaviorally measurable and for which you can hold people accountable. Um, Culture, strategy, and greater purpose.
Awesome. Now,
State those again, Bill.
I'm sorry?
Would you state those again?
Vision, values, values driven leadership, culture, strategy, greater purpose.
I'm
Why?
missing one here.
culture and greater purpose.
Greater purpose.
Yes,
My-
some sort of driving mission that actually is the central point of the alignment of the hearts and minds of your people.
Well, as we define it in the assessment, it's why you do what you do beyond money.
Mm, that's a great, simple explanation. Thank you,
So,
Bill.
Bill, let me restate this so I get it on the board. Vision, greater purpose, values in action, strategy, values driven leadership, and what else?
Culture.
Culture.
And how do you define culture through the lens of your transformation readiness assessment?
How, why, and what we do what we do.
There's a lot to unpack inside of that. And I think actually, I might be jumping ahead of you, Michael, a little bit. And if I am, I apologize. We can pull it back. But I think the most important element about thriving in this age of chaos is that adaptability. And how do we actually cultivate a culture and a operational capability that is adaptable to the changes in the environment and in particular to the uncertainty of this time, right?
Yes. So to connect what you just said to these 6 elements, when you are performing really, really well across all of those 6 elements, both independently and in terms of how they work with each other, you will be adaptable.
Well, but people don't
Bill,
like
what is the
change, right?
what's the principal barrier for? I mean, gosh, it's kind of like when we kind of lay it out like this. It's kind of like, well, there's nothing to it but to do it. I mean, isn't so. Why do many companies, if not most companies, find this difficult?
Well, because the elements do not align with each other. For example, you can set you can create a menu of strategic objectives that sound very, very good in terms of their ambition, in terms of how they differentiate you, in terms of the financial gain that you'll realize by achieving these objectives. But you don't have a culture that's capable of executing. You have people with the wrong habits. You have some wrong people. Uh, some of those people are major shareholders and can be continue to be major shareholders, but they shouldn't be responsible for the growth of the company. Those are hard things to communicate, hard things to accept, and hard things to implement. How does one go about replacing oneself? But you can just simply hire people, for example, who have great technical skills and no people skills, but you have a product or a service that requires great people skills. And you have a strategy that requires that your people have great people skills. You have a lot of product knowledge. You have a lot of product creativity on the development side, but you're not very good with people. That happens a lot.
Yeah, it occurs to me as I'm hearing you now that a lot of people believe alignment is simply being on the same page. And clearly it's not. It's much more than that, as you're getting into.
Right, right. And then we talk about values. And you have values that, they make for great posters, they make for great wall plaques. But people don't live them, or they live them sporadically or intermittently or strategically, situationally. And when you don't live them, you're not held accountable.
So last week in our Fireside Chat, we began to get into some of the mechanisms of culture and personal management around one was having position agreements in place.
Right.
We talked about then having effective one-on-one interviews, meetings, how we do meetings, and specifically the employees meeting with the manager. So flipping the script in terms of those typically weekly one-on-ones, right? So there are specific mechanisms for closing what we were now talking about in terms of the performance culture gap. So and last week we talked about how the actual is if we are performing, if we are growing at the rate of GDP or growing at the level of our market growth, we're actually failing. We're falling behind, and at some point, an upstart or an adjacent incumbent is going to take us out.
That's true.
Then there's that's something that's realistic, and that's against the backdrop of what's potential. Now, potential in this context might be impossible, and in previous Fireside Chats, we've said in order to achieve the improbable, we must first start with envisioning the impossible and working backwards from that. What would it take for our customers to receive 5 times more value than they are today? It's not that we're selling them more, but they're actually realizing 5 times more value. So what does that mean? Well, that kind of shifts us into, what's our customer success like? And what are we doing to really ensure, to make sure that our customers are getting the value that we promised? With the general belief that the higher the value realization by our customers, we'll probably have a better retention rate, a lower churn rate.
Yeah. So I was going to say, that's not quite an oxymoron, but to many people, it would seem like one, right? The idea of giving more value to the customers instead of creating more value for the stakeholders.
Well, giving more value. Chris, I want to be clear. It's not about giving them more. It's about having them realize more value from what we gave them.
Yes, right. But I think that sort of linguistic confusion in that, and because I agree with you, we're on the same, we're talking the same stuff, is part of the bit that keeps people away from thinking like that. Yeah. Because I can't imagine them having more value without giving away more and them meaning less. Because too many people, let me say it this way, too few people believe in this being a non-zero sum game. And we need a broader belief that it isn't a zero-sum game, that we have these tremendous ways of creating value by just having empathy for our customers, empathy for our employees, empathy for our communities in which we live, and having a concern for them in terms of lifting them up, and that by doing good for them, we end up reaping the rewards for ourselves.
Well, and there's another way to approach this, which I have seen in practice. Depending on the mindset and how people in the organization think, we can set the stage for achieving what Michael has just talked about with a different what would it take question. And the different question would be, what would it take to have an 80% market share? And that's externally focused on growth, wild growth. I mean, unimaginable growth. What would it take to have an 80% market share? And then we can talk about all the ways we have to be incredibly and uniquely valuable to our customers.
Well, and that's a great answer to our question. What will it take to thrive in 2022? One of those things is to be able to envision the unimaginable and to adopt this what will it take process that Bill has developed and created into such a powerful tool. I just want to take a break really quick and remind everyone here, for those of you just joining us, that this is Waymakers. And today's topic is how do we thrive in what will it take to thrive in 2022? And I'm here today with Michael Moon and Bill Leiter. Once again, I'm Chris Hewer. We have a few friends in the audience. Hello, Stephen, Heather, Stephanie. Welcome, Ross and Jen and Mark. Very nice of you to join us. And for those of you joining us on our podcast or on YouTube or wherever else you may be, thank you also for joining in. We'd be very happy to take your questions as well. So if you have something that you'd like to talk about or add, or if there's a question for Bill or Michael, please feel free to raise your hand here on Fireside. And I'd be happy to invite you up on stage and get that. In the meantime, we could talk for 5 hours today, so we'll just keep going. But I really, really want to encourage you to ask a question if you can. We really want to help you with some practical advice. Some of the stuff we talk about is more strategic, ethereal, and at the end of the day, we're capable of bringing this down to make it much more tangible for you, to make it actionable for you, and to give you the information and insights you need to thrive in 2022, which is the whole point of us having this conversation today. So Michael,
Bill,
go ahead.
Bill, perhaps we can put a little more meat on the bones here. You introduced the notion of the proposition of a transformation readiness assessment. Why is that necessary? One, and two, can you give us a narrative case of where you use that, and tell us the story about how that rolled out.
How the assessment makes the impact and helps them understand how to get to where they really want to go.
So, in terms of why do it, wouldn't it be nice to know where you're starting from on this journey through chaos? How prepared are you to thrive in that kind or any kind of environment? How are the elements working today? For example, you have a vision, perhaps, and does everybody in the organization know what the vision is? Do they understand its implications? Do they understand how what you do relates to moving?
And why is that important, Bill?
Pardon me?
Why is that important? So what?
Well, how do you row a boat when you've got people rowing in different directions at different speeds with a different end destination in mind?
Well, again, they have their jobs. I just want them to, do their jobs and get it done. Why do I need to kind of give them a vision?
Okay. First of all, if you're just doing a job and you don't know why you're doing it beyond collecting a paycheck and paying your bills, how likely are you to contribute creative ideas? How likely are you to want to make things better? How likely are you to stay if one of your friends says, I know another company where you can do the same thing and earn 10% more? you're gone. You don't have a reason for being where you are doing
Okay.
what you're doing.
So let's stipulate that there are some people, there are some organizations out there with leadership who go, oh, it's that vision thing. It's kind of like it's not really relevant or central to our work. And what you're saying is those organizations are going to fall further and further behind because fewer and fewer people will be innovative, creative, adaptive, and so on. So
Well,
now we're saying, okay, now we've got organizations saying vision's important. Um, uh, how do I bring that into my organization? How do I make that more of a central and vital thing in my organization?
well, it translates in terms of its practical resonance. Um, it connects to both growth, growth in material measurement, greater market share, greater sales, greater earnings, greater shareholder wealth, ability to have better succession plans, ability to attract the best and the brightest from a financial perspective. And it also connects or should connect to your greater purpose. Why
Sure.
are you here? How are you going to make the world better for your presence? That's powerful in terms of having people own their relationship to the company,
Okay.
own vision, and own the reason why you're doing what you're doing.
Cool.
When you take ownership, you are better able to work on the basis of making and keeping commitments rather than simply expending best efforts.
Okay.
Nope.
So tell us a story where this just kind of roll out a narrative case where we put this in action.
Michael, do you mean where he's done an assessment and done this, or in a prior case? Just be
Doesn't
specific.
matter.
Okay. Um, a company in the high end kitchen and bath industry wanted to double their size within 3 years. We started with the assessment, and what they learned from the assessment was what they really lacked and sorely needed was more structure, more clarity, and more of a culture that could make and keep commitments. They had great products, great relationships with key customers, but not a big enough market share. So
And
we
then,
started to help them create more clarity in their communication, in their actions, in their cooperation, in their teamwork. We created cross-functional teams and did other things. Okay, fast forward. We discovered in the process of doing that an opportunity in an area of the business that they had never been before because they couldn't handle that level of complexity with the quality of communication and coordination and some of the values that they have. So we worked on refining their values as well. Okay, fast forward another 6 months. We discovered that new area of endeavor was viable and valuable. We're now heavily engaged in pursuing that area. The goal is no longer to double. The goal is now to triple. And we're on track.
well, so I think that speaks to just very simply the idea that part of the reason for doing an assessment and taking this time here at your end, as we do personally, if you follow Dale Carnegie's advice, perhaps from his wonderful work, is the idea that we're going too fast, that we're too busy doing what we're doing, that we need to take time to reflect on what we've got, because that's how we're going to uncover hidden opportunities like that. And we're actually going to find that maybe even our wildest imagination of what might be possible if we are to pursue that might even not be wild enough. That's
Right.
phenomenal.
Right. I mean, most of the opportunities are hiding in plain sight.
So that's a really great reason why we need to do that. Michael, I'm sorry, you had another question. No, no, another point. Well, I think this is, what are the other sorts of things, Bill, that people have found in going through your assessments? I mean, one that I did, so you guys know, but maybe people in the audience don't know, that I spent a good amount of time working with my dear friend from college, John Estophanis, with rallybright.com, doing a resilient team assessment, working on high performance teams. And when we implemented those types of projects where we were able to look at just the executive team, we were able to find small little even misunderstandings that had happened in the past that we were able to provide space in which we could clear it up with one another and get past some personal friction that was going on amongst the executive leadership team that wasn't allowing them to really perform as a team because there actually was this animosity hidden. And literally, those are the sorts of little itty bitty things, little slights that shouldn't be anything, but people are still carrying around with them. And that's actually why part of the phrasing of Waymakers is that we stand in the full potential future unburdened by the past. And I think that's one of the other things. We find out what are some of those burdens that we're still carrying from the past that we need to shed. But what are some of the other things that people have found in doing the balanced organization assessment that you have, Bill?
That the values are the wrong values. Their stated values will
Wow.
not induce the behaviors necessary to achieve their strategic objectives, or market dominance or rapid growth or whatever the objectives are. Their values don't support those objectives. That's first half of the coin. The other half of the coin is that the values may work very well, except people are not held accountable for living them.
Because, well, that's a big topic. And of course, values driven leadership, one of the secrets that you really talk about in your book is actually how do we measure those values in action? I don't want to get into that quite yet. I want to put a pin in that, measuring values in action, and come back to it. Because I think there's really some amazing other things that we learn from this assessment. I mean, the idea that the values are not the right values. I understand how that can happen. All too often, organizational leaders think that a 1 day, 2 day offsite where we put together our vision and values without the context of the rest of it is enough to put something together that's great. But to your point, Bill, it just ends up being a poster on a wall, not anything that people are actually living. That's huge. That's a huge insight. Are there some other like smaller little insights that lead to that massive opportunity?
Well, one of the things that often comes up when we look at culture is the absence of diversity.
Mm,
There's and especially diversity of thought. It's very difficult to listen for a leader to listen to somebody with only a fraction of their experience, only a fraction of their skill, a completely different cultural and academic and workforce point of view, present an idea that is diabolically opposed, diabolically opposite to what you believe and know is true and correct. Accept it, explore it, and God forbid, implement some of it, and find out that they were right and you were wrong.
So, Bill, let's use one or two stories from your experience. Are there any particular incidences, episodes, etc., that relate this in terms of lack of diversity in your work in law enforcement? So the reason I say law enforcement is that law enforcement is under a a political legislative mandate to become more diverse. Two, law enforcement is a particular kind of environment that is, how would I say, not particularly open embrace of change. They kind of like to move slowly in terms of any changes. Can you share any experience of how you brought diversity of thought into a change-resistant environment, such as Homeland Security or law enforcement?
Yes,
Mm.
there's one shining example that I had absolutely nothing to do with, but they employed some of the same principles that we're talking about. There's a pair of LAPD officers, Phil and Imada Tangarides, both LAPD cops. They work South Central in Los Angeles, which is one of the highest crime gang activity areas of the greater Los Angeles area. And Phil is white, Imada is black. They both grew up in South Central Los Angeles. They both still live in South Central Los Angeles. They have 4 or 5 of their own children, and they work with young people, at risk young people. And they work on the streets, in the communities. By the way, they've both been with the force with LAPD for in excess of 20 years. Neither one of them has ever fired a weapon.
Mm.
Um, they started reaching out to kids, and there's a premise in marketing that applies to community relations in law enforcement. You have to meet people where they are, not where you are. And so they did, and they started working with young people, and they would come up against a kid who was about to join a gang, and they said, "You need to join Little League." And the kid said, "What the hell is Little League? Never heard of it. Didn't know anything about it." And they were shocked initially. So they formed some Little League teams, and then they formed some Pop Warner football teams. And when Pop Warner football games were played on Sunday, it was almost always kids from who were children of gang members who were in the Crips and the Bloods who are at war with each other.
Mm.
And Phil and Imada got together with the gang members and the gang leaders. And on Sunday afternoon, during a Pop Warner game, there was a truce. Nobody caused any trouble. And the league thrived, and the Little League thrived. And then they started dance classes. They were guests of honor at Barack Obama's first inaugural address. They're nationally recognized. They're 2 people who were then given license to form a department around their skills and their knowledge and their experience. And I've talked with both of them, worked with both of them on the teaching side at USC. And they had 200 interviews. And from those 200 interviews, they could only find 9 people who had the aptitude to do what they do.
And these 200 interviews were from the 30 or 40,000 people in blue in LA police.
No, well, it's only 10,000, but
Huh.
it should be 30, but it's only 10. And they found 200 applicants, and 9 of them were acceptable.
Mm. So actually, a really important point there is, knowing so important to know those values up front, because of course that's perhaps part of the broader problem that people are looking at with police reform is getting the right sort of people in the right sorts of positions, doing the right sort of work.
What they did was create a culture within a culture.
Right.
Driven by a very different set of values than those lived by most of law enforcement. And the reformers are looking for.
Bill, as we correlate this to now commercial organizations, we might then say or kind of frame that diversity, inclusion, and equity, neural diversity or cognitive diversity within an organization, first and foremost, is a team sport.
Yes.
In that team, whether it's just whether it's a two-person tag team like these two police officers or something larger, but that the team can and must create its own microculture of values that are being lived and reinforced and practiced, so that first and foremost, it's a team sport. Two, it's the job of the team to create its own microculture and use that as a persistent, transformative catalyst for the larger organization.
That's certainly one way of doing it.
Okay.
I think I want to put that into
other ways of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you can try to make it global from the start.
But that requires an all-in commitment from the CEO, who's then going to then drive it into his or her organization.
Right, and it's more doable when the organization is still in its early stages of development, when it hasn't lapsed into 10 years of inappropriate tradition.
It's a good way of saying it. And I think part of the problem, though, is, Bill, that many leaders look at it and say, oh, this is too hard. I'm never going to be able to change this in that way or to create that happening across the whole organization. I know a lot of change agents, younger change agents in particular, who have that sort of drive, but then they look at this organization that they're a part of, whether it's 100, 500, 5,000, and they go, well, how am I going to make an impact? And Michael, to your point earlier, I think too many people forget that they need to self-generate that sort of culture, that sort of environment. Again, going back to our episode last week about generating gratitude and having gratitude as a key pillar upon which the organization operates and their culture thrives. It just gets really, it's possible, but it takes that small group of determined people to change the world. And those two people, like the officers, show that this can be done. And there's countless examples out there. But for some reason, many people forget that when they're looking at approaching it, which is where I think the idea of let's create our team in a team, create that culture there, and show that success and get that to organically adopt. Perhaps there's not the time because the business might be in crisis, but I find that as a more plausible approach for many people.
Well, it's a multi.
I want to introduce a new theme to our conversation around the integration or synthesis or synergy of culture plan, strategic plan, and personal plan. And I'm specifically in preparing for this fireside chat. I began to investigate on my own. I began to investigate, well, what is the difference that makes a difference in terms of being a catalyst? Whether you're the CEO or a co-founder, a program director, whatever. What is the catalyst that when it kind of comes into an organization, it begins to, it rings a bell that you can't unring. It sets in motion a cascade of transformation, or at least rapid evolution. And the thing that I hit on today, is, and it's more than just, it's kind of in the broad domain of values. And I want to bring forward the notion of true value and true values. And a lot of people, first of all, it's been my experience in doing career audits with about several dozens executives, is that most people, even bright, self-aware executives, do not know their values. They can't articulate them. And for the most part, what I have found is that executives can crisply articulate their values when they are violated.
Yeah.
High contrast. And that contrast takes you out of your conceptual, metaphysical, big picture, whatever, and it throws you into your deep down. Deep down, this is fucking wrong. I've been wronged, or this is just not right. And so the first thing I'd like to really draw attention to is that true value is something that lives deep down. And as we begin to inspect, as we begin to go into the deep down, we discover a couple, three things about our true values. First of all, true values are not what's on the wall. They are not what's on the brochure. They're not what's on our mission statement in the website. So that's window dressing. It's lipstick on the pig. It's kind of necessary, expedient language because I needed to check the box. Or it sounds right. I aspire to that. And so in many respects, the values that I see are shallow, hollow, inauthentic, and are not rooted in my deep down sense of what's right. That's one. So as we kind of go deeper into the deep down, into your heart and into your gut, and into your instinctual center in terms of this is who I am, it's clear to me now that there are two kinds of values. Now, they're flip sides of the same coin, but there are values that are sacred. There are values that there's no fucking joking about. These are like life or I live or die by this. It is sacred to who I am and all that is good in the world. And there are egregious violations, taboos of those true values. And one of the companies I first ran across in this was at Amazon. And Amazon has done some extraordinary things around true values. And so, for example, Amazon has as part of their culture plan, these values are sacred. Don't waste money. Whatever savings we can put back into the customer experience in terms of convenience, speed, one butt, you got it done, low price. So it seems to me, Bill and Chris, and I'm just putting this out now, is part of our discussion around values is really discerning the things that are the shallow, inauthentic labels of what looks good or what's convenient and expedient, and those things that are truly sacred to who we are, that then become the basis of our moral action and moral imperative. And so I throw that open for us now to perhaps explore, challenge, refine in terms of true values and that there are values that live in the deep down that when brought forward and put into a culture as a function of this is for what we stand, for which we are an irrevocable stand to see realized in the world, that then becomes the basis for internally generating the condition of readiness, the condition of resiliency, the condition for being ready for whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Bill, let me put that to you in a question. So as you start looking at that, and as you've worked with executive leaders over the years and working to create balanced organizations, how have you encountered those sorts of deep intrinsic values in conflict or in alignment with the organizational values? Particularly from the leader's perspective, not the organization, right? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the leaders and the followers quickly become so intertwined because values are organizational. You can't have a leader living one set of values and people in the organization living a different set. That doesn't work. If they're not deeply held, they're not real. Um,
So you're saying that deeply held also means deeply shared.
yeah, it means universally shared,
Yeah.
and it means universally accountable. So, for example, now we live in an imperfect world, and it's doubtful that you're ever going to get 100% of a 10 or 20 or 30,000 or more employee organization where every single person is marching
Yeah.
in lockstep. But as a general rule, if you've got a large population of employees and 80% are doing a great job of living the deeply held values in the ways in which they were intended to be lived, you've probably got a pretty high functioning organization. Now, how do you get there? Well, accountability is the key. If you have values, we know neuroscientifically are a matter of choice. You can choose to believe in whatever you're prepared to unconditionally live. So when
Bill,
you
let me
make
just quick mark this out. So within our fireside chat, there's been an ongoing argument, discussion around values. Now, Bill, you're basically saying from a cognitive science perspective, values are relative. Values are learnable, changeable, malleable, vis-a-vis neuroplasticity.
and that's not just cognitive, that's neuroscience as well.
Well, no, I'm just saying from a neuroscience perspective, which is piled high and deep in data, which has been gone through the academic review, peer review process, there is a general consensus within a branch of neuroscience that values are learned and changeable.
Can be learned.
Right. And I'm coming at it also from a neurolinguistic, neuroscience perspective, and I maintain that at the deep down, at the level of sacred and taboo, there is no plasticity involved. It is just black and white and immutable. Now, so clearly we are having a conversation perhaps around or surfacing perhaps a distinction between these deep down true values and those that are then socialized, learned, and so on.
Well, to your point, Michael, if that is true, and the values that you hold at the level you just described, where did they come from? They came from early life experiences.
So
And
again,
so
there's one paradigm of nature nurture that these values are learned adaptations for how to survive in your family of origin.
how to survive
And
and how to
that'll be
survive
part of
and
that whole evolutionary psychology theme.
it's how to survive and also how to thrive, how to succeed.
Right. And I guess I'm representing the perspective that is a paradigm. It is self-referencing. It is fully laden with all sorts of confirmation bias. And it is fundamentally not true from my perspective.
So what
My
is true?
perspective, my perspective is that we are either dumb angels, drunk dumb angels, or smart apes. And and the paradigm that you're arguing is smart apes. And I'm saying, nope, I disagree. Now, again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just say my worldview is fundamentally, radically different. That there are these eternal, sacred values, and that part of being human and part of being human today is that we accept a lot of lies that our society told us, such that we live a whole bunch of shallow, inauthentic, learned values, and that part of a life well lived is to accept and is to acknowledge that I accepted a whole bunch of bullshit as I tried to figure out how to survive and thrive in my family. And it is just that. It's learned, adapted bullshit. And that part of a life well lived, part of a meaningful life, is to do violence to that learned adaptation bullshit and recover my true authentic self. And more importantly, to realign myself, both socially, professionally, with my deep down sacred, not to be fucked with values. That is to say, the human condition is one of inauthenticity. The human condition is one of living lies. The human condition is one of doing shit to survive while forgetting your true self, your true nature.
Well, for example, one of the learned values, and it is learned in a variety of ways from a variety of sources, is integrity.
Yeah. Well,
you're not born with it.
So it gets into then the question, and perhaps our friend Stephen Gans could come in here. Is integrity a core dimension of being human, however, in the course of living life, we come from it kind of moves from just being kind of a vague sense of good to now being something that is conscious and deliberate and practiced and treasured and and honored.
Stephen, please unmute yourself. We'd love your reply to that. Little monkey button in the bottom of the screen, Stephen.
He might be.
You hit it twice. One more time.
Can you hear me?
We got you. Stephen. Welcome. Thank you.
Yes. Hi. Yeah, it's a deep question you guys are touching on, in my opinion. There's a lot of thinking that's been going on about it, about values and their valuation. How do you really live your values? And that's different with different people. So, for example, if I'm talking about my value as authentic, or if I'm talking about my value as doing to others, as the golden rule suggests, I would have others do to me. These things vary from perspective to perspective. So sometimes people use tough love and are very confrontational. Other times people are very loving and gentle. So people deploy these values in terms of how they best have decided they most effectively work. But I don't know how you really inculcate an organization that has values, as Bill is proposing. That suggests that we somehow can line and march in step, but marching in step might be intrinsically against people's values.
May I just
who are more individual oriented. So I'm just offering a question about how we conceptualize this question of values in organizations.
And I want to come back to that on the organization. And may I suggest that the organization's values are driven by what they measure and what they reward, right? So one of the things I go back to is how, and it probably still is the case in many companies, unfortunately, but that superstar salesperson gets away with everything. Sexual harassment, lying, all sorts of stuff. Why? Because they deliver the goods and they drive sales every year and they've tripled our sales or whatever. Right. So they value, obviously, in that case, revenue over good moral behavior or whatever it might be. So,
and Chris, I would submit that is a catalyst. It is a catalyst for leadership of the organization to then retrospect in which to inquire, well, who are we? And I think the academic research led by Bob Sutton over at Stanford, the author of the No Asshole Rules, the research is quite clear that there's a certain level of adolescent antisocial behavior that we can tolerate, but that bar has lowered, not raised. So the level in terms of what's acceptable and what's permittable, and more importantly, to what degree am I complicit in this toxic behavior? I think the standard has become the standard for being engaged, socially aware, empathetic, considerate. That standard has raised, not lowered over time. And I think that's what we're seeing in the news is like the goalpost moved, the standard raised. What was just last week acceptable is just morally repugnant today.
Mm.
And
Really good
so,
point.
so it just seems to me, Stephen, to your point, and this is kind of my grand theory, is that we are all, as individuals, relationships, organizations, we are all in the process of becoming accountable for and being self-directed in uh, discovering our true value, our true values, of discovering and separating out my learned adaptations from who it is that I am, who it is that we truly are. And in the process, that is a journey, it's a discovery, an epic quest of discovery and transformation. And so I think to Bill's point, that aligned readiness or a transformational readiness is not a destination, but it is a journey, an epic quest of discovery, of enlightenment, of transformation. And that there's always something else to learn. There's always some place. There's always something else to add. And
Yes, yes, it is a journey. This is not a series of isolated events. It is a journey, and a question that always has to be asked of anybody, regardless of what organization they're with or what size organization is: are the values we live taking us to the place we want to go?
sure,
And if
let
they're
me
not, we
let me bookend that. Let me book. So, in my conversations with startups, where I've spent most of my time, and specifically startups that are beginning to scale, the question that I have with the CEOs and co-founders is, what kind of culture best serves your customer? And it goes back to the prime directive. There's no greater purpose than to attract, serve, and keep profitable customers for life. So, what culture best serves our ability to attract, serve, and keep profitable customers for life? And at that point, things become patently off point, just like nope, 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 nope. And just by a process of ruthless editing, we start to shape in the raw clay of who we are and how we do things the culture that best serves our ability to attract, serve, and keep profitable customers for life. Constitute these values in action. And these values in action directly correlate to our ability to attract, serve, and keep profitable customers for life. And I submit that that is the basis for measuring our performance of culture performance.
Is customer retention?
Yeah, brand network effects and customer retention.
Hey, there we go. What will it take to thrive in 2022? Improve your customer retention by creating more value for them without necessarily having to give more, by having them recognize the value in what the services and products that you're providing and how they impact and influence their lives.
And the flip side of that is to truly increase customer retention as a function of systems, processes, and capabilities. The ability to increase customer retention will require a similar mirror activity within the culture, because culture and brand are deeply entangled. They are, in fact, two facets of the same entity: values and action. Well, you want to say something in conclusion?
I mean, it's been said um, that culture. Peter Drucker said it. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And to your point, I think you just illustrated that. The and the question you asked and you have been asking of your clients is a key question, and it drives the answer to that question drives a company toward balance. We define values in this way. Your values turned inward define and shape your culture. Turned outward, they define and shape your brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that synergy between the brand and our internal culture. But we're really out of time. And really what we're getting at is, and this is actually part of the challenge, right? We all know that there is so much to this. There's so much complexity in our organizations today, particularly as we start looking at all of the stuff that has just kind of happened to us without our much intention and the unintentional consequences within the culture. That the first thing is taking an honest, independent look at what is that culture looking like today. So doing a transformational readiness assessment is the first kind of step towards that. And what we're really stepping towards, as we've defined over the last several weeks through prior conversations, is this sense of an organization that embraces aligned readiness, that's able to, like standing there and receiving a tennis serve, is able to quickly adapt and adjust to whatever comes at me. If it's a slice, if it's a slam, whatever it is, that I'm ready to take it. We want to set up the entire organization in that way to be able to return that serve and to win the point, right? And so what we've actually uncovered over the past several weeks, several months really, is that one of the most important elements of that is a sense of co-ownership. And as we've gotten into in the last 20, 25 minutes or so, it comes down to understanding those values, how we live those values, how we measure those values in action. Michael, one last point, and let's get this wrapped up.
Right. So I submit for the people out there that are listening to this today, is that co-ownership truly starts with the investigation as to your own particular deep down truth, your true values, and what you consider to be sacred. And in the course of that, you, as I have discovered, we all are going to discover that I've been living with a certain level of bullshit in my life. I've been living with a certain amount of inauthenticity. But thank God, I now have the opportunity to set that aside and move deeper. So I submit that the experience of co-ownership of the mission, vision, strategic plan, my way of working, starts with the personal quest to really discover what are my deep down true values, what is really sacred in terms of then aligning your work, your career to the fullest expression of those deep down values. And in the course of that, discovering that there are some organizations, there are some performative contexts that draw that out, and there are other contexts that are neutral or even toxic to it. And so I suggest that a lot of the great resignation is about the sudden recognition of this job that I have right now is killing me, literally killing me, and that I cannot spend much more. I'm out of here. I am now threatened, physically threatened with survival. I must leave. So the journey becomes: what are your true values? What are those things that are so core to who you are, so sacred, so unwilling to compromise, and then start to spin up. Or start to discover what's the performative context for me that draws that out. And part of that is, am I in an organization that share that express, and perhaps more importantly, am I in an organization that is a vehicle to support the expression of my values? And so it's not like, what can I do for the organization? And this is where I'd like to leave it today. But what can this organization do for me?
Mm,
And
very
that
true.
has been the shift in terms of our age of chaos. More and more people are asking, hey, I get the job done. I'm professional. I've spent years developing my craft. The question is this organization a fit for who I am? What does this organization bring to me in terms of velocity and clarity to the expression of my deep down values? And I submit that is the unacknowledged catalyst for a lot of what's being called the great resignation, the great reshuffle.
Yes, absolutely agree. Hey, Bill, any closing thoughts before we wrap up here today and get this closed?
Wherever you are, assess where that is.
Yeah, and that's why here again at year end we have a little extra time with some holidays. We have a chance to look back on the year that's passed and a chance to look forward. And I think the underlying point that Michael was really making is that oftentimes, in order to change an organization, we really need to look deep down in ourselves and figure out what we need to change in order to affect the change across the organization to operate to our full potential. And that's what we really want to accomplish here with Waymakers and coming together and bringing all this different experience and these different perspectives here is to provide you with the tools and with an understanding of what will it take to thrive in 2022 and beyond. This is Chris Ewer for Waymakers. Thank you, Mike Moon. Thank you, Bill Leiter. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Stephen, for stepping up on stage and sharing some thoughts. And we look forward to seeing you next week as we'll continue delving into another aspect of this very important conversation. Thank you.